Hi everyone, welcome to this watercolor tutorial. If you want to just focus on the painting itself and not worry about sketching, the description below will take you to my website where you can download this sketch and you can follow along. We do a lot of the wet on wet here to really just get some soft blends within your cup, and I show you a little bit of the wet on dry blending technique with the whipped cream. Let's get started. Before I jump into the techniques, I just have to say my focus was in and out with my camera. Technology did me dirty, but let's jump into the tutorial. I tried my best to cut and splice, and I'm going to do this voiceover to help you guys. So we're going to do the wet on wet technique here, which is when we have a wet surface and we paint on top with another wet surface, and we're going to be focusing primarily on the edges, and I'm using blue to shadow. I find that if I use black, it just really dulls down my colors. So I'm using blue, I'm focusing on my edges. We're doing that wet on wet technique so I can have some soft blends within my cup. This really helps me just build up my layers. And then I come in just a little bit towards, not the center, but the side of the center almost, and I did put a little bit, just a touch of purple gray, just a hair. That way I still have that blue shadow to help me as well. So I'm going to let that dry and then move on to my handle and literally do the exact same technique. So I applied some water. I've then touched the edges with a little bit of blue. I'm letting that wet on wet technique do its magic and let those colors blend, and then I'm coming in just to really make those edges pop with just the slightest little bit of gray. And you'll see here I've left plenty of white space, the same on the main cup as well. Lots of white space to let the paper kind of be my light source so that it doesn't look like a big muggy blob. I'm painting directly onto the page now. I'm not doing the wet on wet technique for the back part, so it is further away, so I am putting a little bit more pigment, a little bit more darkness towards the back of the cup. That's just to do with depth perception. We're going to try out a different technique with the plate. We're going to be doing the wet on dry technique, and that's when we're applying wet paint onto a dry surface. You'll see here I have a harsh edge, so I just dip my brush into water and then just literally touching the edges. I'm going in, just softening up that line so that I have a soft blend between my gray shadow and the plate itself. Again, don't forget to come around the pumpkin. The pumpkin will naturally create a shadow, and the little cinnamon stick that I have right there, I'm shadowing that as well. I'm going to throw on a second layer here, so I'm using my hand dryer to just speed up the process. Once that is completely dry, I come in with a darker blue. I actually used indigo for this and did this technique all over again. I applied that indigo and then I used water to just soften out that harsh line that I had. But you'll also notice that I let that first layer shine through. I did not completely cover that first layer, and that's how we build layers and depth within our watercolor painting. Using the wet on dry technique again, I'm coming in and filling my hot cup of hot chocolate or coffee, whatever it is that you are painting, and I'm just freehanding and filling out that space right here with a nice brown color. This layer 100% dry before you move on to the topping right here. So the same technique that we did for the plate, we're doing up top with the whipping cream. I'm coming in with that blue-gray shade. I've applied it to that first line, and then I used some water to blend it out, and then I just tapped the edge a little bit with a little bit of gray, and I'm going to do this repeatedly all the way around. The key here is to leave white space. If you don't leave white space, it's going to look muddy and not clear in that nice white that we're looking for. We're just focusing on the shadows here and the reflective tones of the white to give you that pretty whipped cream. So I'm repeating that same technique, putting the color down. I'm then using my clean brush to just touch the edges just to blend out any harsh lines that I might have. I'm doing that over and over again. Towards the bottom of the whipped cream, I'm going to go in with a little bit more of a brown shadow color to go around the base of it, just because the white reflects what's around it. So that's why I went with a little bit more of a brownish tone here, and I covered the whole bottom of it, as you can see. Moving on to the cinnamon sticks, we're going to be doing a scooping technique. So I've came in with the same color that I did for my cup of coffee, and then I'm going to get rid of everything on my brush. I'm going to tap my napkin so it's just damp, and while that brown is still wet, I'm coming in and I'm scooping up some of the pigment, and this will create a really nice highlight. I'm also touching the edges while it's still wet, so using that wet on wet technique with a little bit of a darker, more pigmented color just around the edges, letting it bleed and blend. I'm going to leave that little circle part until that last part is dry. I will come back and fix the little tops. So I'm doing the same thing that I just did before, coming in with that solid color, getting rid of everything in my brush, scooping up, and then touching my edges with a more pigmented color and letting those colors blend nicely with the wet on wet technique. Once that section is dry, I can come in with a darker color and just fill it in to create a little bit of depth within my little cinnamon sticks. On the back of the plate, I'm going to do a little bit more of a reflection and shadow back there. So you'll see I'm going in with the wet on wet technique, sorry, the wet on dry technique, and then just blending that out. So I'm going to use a different technique than I usually do with my pumpkin. I'm going in and doing that wet on dry technique. Usually I do groove by groove, but I'm filling out this pumpkin completely with a nice wash of orange before I do anything else. So I'm filling it out. I'm using a lot of water to just spread out that pigment, and I'm going very light. With watercolor, you always want to start with your lighter layers first, otherwise it's harder to layer. So coming in again with a wash while it is still wet, I'm coming in and doing that scooping technique that we did with the cinnamon sticks. That way I can have a nice shadow on my nice pumpkin. Again, using that wet on wet technique, I am touching different points around the core. I'm coming around the edges. I'm also coming towards the bottom, and I'm coming around the grooves as well, and just letting those darker orange colors just bleed and blend naturally so we can have some nice depth within our painting. To really make this pumpkin pop, you gotta let it dry. So I'm hitting it here with the dryer before I go on and I add the wet on dry techniques. So I'm coming in with a darker orange and I'm touching those grooves to really emphasize those. And then I'm gonna come in and just create a little bit of focal lines towards the bottom just to make this pumpkin look a little bit more realistic as well. So you might be surprised here, when I paint the stem of my pumpkins, I like to do 2 layers. I like to do a layer of green before I come in and I touch it with brown. My favorite green color to mix, it's sap green. I do a little bit of hooker's green, and then I come in with cadmium red. I feel like it just makes the most prettiest green color. And I also like to leave a little bit of white space as well. You'll see I haven't completely filled it in. I let this dry before I come in and I apply some light brown. I just keep building up those layers until I'm happy with my stem, but that's the technique that I use for my stems. Despite my wonky videos, I've definitely learned I have to place my camera way higher so my hand doesn't pull it in and out of focus. So next videos will not be like this, so I apologize for that, but I hope you still learned some great tricks along the way if you have stayed and watched this video. You want to just really make this pumpkin pop, keep adding your layers, keep blending it out. I'm pretty happy with how this cup turned out. If you like this video and you want to see more like this, check out my website or like and subscribe to this video, and I will paint with you guys soon. Happy painting!